Hey you guys, it's Cassie. Welcome to video 1 of making our Christmas junk journals. So thank you to everyone who purchased a kit from me. You will have all of these items that we're using today in the kit, but I am going to go through the list of what you'll need for this video specifically. And that way people who are watching and joining along who did not purchase a kit can gather those items so that they'll be ready to make along with us. Okay, so you'll need all of the fabric pieces that came in your kit. Obviously you don't need the cord or the string that came with it just yet. But you will need all of the fabric, the lace, or the sari trim, and the little ribbon that came with it. I have this extra blue netting that I thought I might like to add, just so I can show you guys how to applique like a lace piece on top. So I'll do some of this, and that way if you want to do that step you can. Obviously this did not come in your kit, but you can grab some of your own from your own stash. You'll need the Tyvek envelope that everything was wrapped inside. So if you bought a kit, you will have received a note that said, don't throw away the Tyvek envelope because you'll need it. This is the step where you need it. You'll also need the file folder and a piece of the printed pattern paper. So obviously you're not limited to the paper that came in the kit. You can use obviously something from your own stash. So this is also the part where you'll decide if you want to create your cover just plain without the flap or with the flap. And if you decide you want to do the flap, you will also need your junk mail envelope, which, sorry everybody, I sent you more junk mail, but I figured you needed it, so I would include one just in case you're like my husband and throw them all away immediately. So you'll also need a postcard and just a sheet of interesting paper from your kit. I sent you a lot of extra papers, so you can choose one and not feel like you're going to steal from a page of the journal, because you should still have enough to create a journal. Okay, so I am just going to clear my workspace and then we'll get started. Okay, so the first thing you will want to do is take your paper trimmer. I am just going to shove my sewing machine out of the way because we don't need it just yet. Take your paper trimmer and actually trim down your file folder. So a Kaihei sized journal is 8 1/4 inches tall by 5 inches wide. Okay. So this is the piece that we will be stitching to. So you'll want to save this, obviously, just set it aside. And then the pattern paper you want to trim to 10 inches. Now this is a directional paper, so I'll want to cut this way 8 1/4 and this way 10 inches. So if you have a non-directional paper, which many of the papers that I included in the kits were non-directional, it doesn't matter obviously which direction is which. And then 8 1/4. Okay, so if you have a scoreboard, you can take your scoreboard and actually score at 5 inches on this piece, your Tyvek. So if you are creating a the flap on your journal, you'll want to cut 2 pieces of Tyvek. So I always just trim off the end, which has like the sticky and it's not very even. So I trim that off and then just cut a piece that, I mean, it literally can be this wide and threads won't rip through. So just cut a piece off and then just trim the ends off. So I never cut these exact. I always glue it down and then cut around with my scissors. Okay, so now we've got our 2 pieces of Tyvek. Obviously, you'll want to trim the one that goes inside the flap a little bit more, probably, just so that it's not super wide and showing through the window or whatever. So set that aside also. And that's all you need this Tyvek for. You can obviously use it for other projects. I sent you a whole envelope. So I'm just gonna put mine aside. Okay, so prepping the fabric. Okay, so I haven't quite decided what fabrics I want to use. I know you guys got the eyelet, like the white eyelet in your kits. Obviously, a lot of people who are joining in did not buy a kit because they only had 6. But yeah, so just pick out some coordinating fabrics. I think I'm going to use these 3 plus my netting. So, and then the little lace, which these go on after the base is stitched together. Okay, so essentially what you want to do is create a piece, a big piece of fabric that's been patchworked together, that is 8 1/4 inches tall by 10 inches wide, plus about 1 inch on each side. So the 8 1/4 would then be 10 1/4 by 12. Okay, so as wide as my cutting mat here, plus 10 1/4 high. Okay, yeah, that's right. So I think what I'm going to do is actually create some strips out of this. And, oh, sorry for knocking the camera. Yeah, so this is long enough. So I'm going to stitch these 2 together this way. So those will be like that. Okay, and then I do want a piece for the upper half on this side. So maybe I'll use this. And then the back will be more plain. Like, I want my sari trim to go across this section. So, but on the back side it'll be more plain, which means you may want to create some additional interest on the back using like another like patchwork design, or like for example we could do some vertical stripes this way, if that makes sense, or just create another stripe pattern there on the back. Okay, so decide how you want your cover to look. And keep in mind, it is going to be split down the middle. And then you'll want to stitch the pieces together essentially how you would any other stitching. So just a quarter or a half an inch seam allowance here, straight stitched. You don't have to do the zigzag or anything fancy because you won't see it. And then I will come back and show you guys what I do after that. Okay, so I thought you guys might like to see how I stitch things together, just in case you are not super great at it or have never done kind of patchworking before. I have been a quilter for quite a while, and so I just kind of assume that everyone knows how to do that, but perhaps not. So I'm just gonna quickly stitch through a few things and show you. I just have like a very inexpensive Brother machine, like it's manual everything and really basic. So in fact, it's quite frustrating because a lot of times when I start stitching, like the thread doesn't, like the tension is off somehow, but anyway, so let's just stitch through this. Literally just a straight stitch, and like I'm not even super careful about stitching straight or sorry, I'm like losing my cover that I set aside earlier, so okay, so literally it's just a straight stitch, and then I'm going to top stitch to make everything lay flat. You can press. I'm probably not going to, and I even have like this huge wrinkle in it. I don't really worry about pressing very much with journal making, just because especially on covers, because we are going to pull it pretty tight when we create the actual cover. So you can press if you want to. If it makes you feel happy, do that. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I'm not going to. Okay, so now remember on my cover design, I wanted to have, let me just get everything straight here. Okay, so I wanted to have kind of a striped pattern where it was striped on the bottom half and then striped on the top. So I'm just gonna trim this. Obviously I need it to be about 6 inches, so I'm just gonna cut this right there. So 5 inches plus an inch to wrap around the cover and stitch on the back. Okay, so now I want to take the top half of my cover for the front and stitch it along this way. So actually I'll top stitch first and then do that. So by top stitching, all I mean is I lay my seam allowance down flat and then stitch on the side where the seam allowance is laid. So, and I literally do it as close to, I don't know if you can see that, as close to the edge of the seam as possible, so that and so when I am stitching, I am just gently pulling to where it's laying flat. I'm not stretching or like, yeah, stretching, but I am pressing it apart as I'm stitching down so that the seam is now very, very flat, and like the seam allowance is laying flat on the back. Okay? Plus you get the double security of like the stitches not coming out and all that. So that's that. I am now going to stitch this to the other side here. Okay. And I'm not worrying about back stitching or anything. Oh, needle's down. I wonder it wouldn't go in. Okay, not worrying about back stitching because we are going to be stitching over it. Just making sure that seam allowance is really flat while I stitch through. Okay. So now I will go in and top stitch this. Hopefully this tutorial is really clear. And easy to follow. I know I've had a lot of people message me, maybe this is easier to see. So that's how I top stitch. Like it is literally like less than a 1/16 of an inch probably. But it just creates like this really flat, neat stitch right along the edge. Okay, so now we are ready to stitch the two halves together. And since I know that this end, like this half is my 5 inches plus my seam allowance on this end, we're using this end as the base to judge where to place everything. So I'm starting this piece right up against the edge over here so that this piece will be the right dimensions, I guess. Okay? So I'm just lining everything up roughly. Obviously this is not exact. And I'm not stitching all the way, just roughly my 10 or 12 inches that I need for my cover. Maybe a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so that should be it. Now see, on this side, because I wanted everything to line up and be pretty square, I had a much larger seam on this side, but that's okay because that's all not going to be seen. I'm going to go ahead and top stitch the rest and trim it down, and then I'll show you how to line your cover. I am just going to make sure that this is the right. Ooh, that's going to be tight. That should still be okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go back and top stitch what I haven't already, and then I'll be back on to show you how to finish the base of the cover. Okay, so I have top stitched everything and kind of trimmed down the piece, like this was extra, and so I just clipped this off. Set it aside because we will use this to make our ruffles and tabs and things later. Okay, so now we just want to make sure that the piece is going to work well for the cover. So you remember I wanted this to be my midpoint. So it is lining up with the center of the cover fold. And yeah, so now I guess we're ready to stitch it all to the actual cover. You'll notice I did not attach my sari trim or this ribbon yet. We'll applique it after we stitch it to the cover. So I'm just going to set that aside. Okay, so we want the wrong side facing, and we will just line this up roughly with look at all this that got stitched into the seam. Anything like this you can just clip off. Okay. So we want the wrong side facing, line this up roughly with where you want the midpoint to be, or the fold, the spine of your journal. And remember orientation. So this is obviously the front cover like that. Okay. So I'm just going to take some regular paper clips and just clip it around. So now I'm just going to fold it closed. Now it's okay that this goes over. I'll just make sure I'm in frame. It's okay that this goes over. I would rather the seam be on the back side than the front. Okay, so if it goes over, that's perfectly okay. Let's talk about corners. Okay, so on the corner, pull it to a point like so, like that. And we're just gonna clip it to where there is about, oh, I don't know, like 1/4 or 1/8 of an inch away from where the paper actually is, or the card. So it should look something like that. Okay, and so what you're going to do is fold that in and then fold this up. Okay, so as you're stitching, you'll just stitch your corner, fold this when you get to about right here, fold it up, and then stitch over it, and it'll hold it in place. I always fold a corner and start at that corner when I am stitching around the cover. So I'm just going to stitch a little bit and show you guys how I do it, and just kind of talk about, trying not to make you guys sick while I adjust my camera. Just talk about like how I pull the fabric or don't pull the fabric, etc. Okay. Okay, so you'll notice I am keeping like 1/8 of an inch around the edge. Okay, so just pull your, obviously you don't want to stitch over your paper clips. Just pull them out as you get there. And I'm just like gently tugging the fabric and holding it tight. Hopefully this isn't like shaking too much. Okay. Again, not pulling or stretching or anything, just gently tugging. We do want to make sure everything is tight, but not like to where it's going to make the cover buckle in on itself. So I'm just going to prep this little corner. Work. Okay, so that is the base of the cover. Okay, so that's how it looks. Obviously mine is a little crooked, but that's okay. It does not matter all that much because after you add the flap and any applique work that you might do, you can often hide if like you've got a little curved area in your cover. Okay, so now we can applique. Again, I do want my sari trim just right here. And then I know I want this maybe over here. Yeah, I think I want a little piece over here. Let me just move my sewing machine so you can see. So I'm just trimming off a piece of my little bias tape here. And I'm just going to create a little vertical piece there and attach my sari trim. So you can choose to do a zigzag stitch at this point or just a straight stitch like we have been doing. You will want to back stitch at the ends of any applique work that you do. Oh, I almost forgot. I am going to do a small piece of this just over I got this from Gabriella. Thank you, Gabriella. This beautiful netting. And I knew I wanted to use a piece on this journal. So I'm just picking out a piece that I like. And I'm just going to roughly cut it out. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. So I stitched this part to okay. So now I'm ready to add my sari trim. And actually now that this netting piece is on, I've decided I want my sari trim to be a little bit more centered so that I'm not covering this flower. Okay. So I'm just going to do a straight stitch and obviously back stitch. And that way, that ties in the netting on the front side with just a little piece there. I might just trim this little piece off. Okay, so that's it. That's the base cover. Now, obviously, you will want to, let me just clear out these and just readjust my camera a little bit. You'll want to take the Tyvek strip now and attach it to the lining of your journal, like the end page here. So obviously this is the exact same size as your cover. You can choose to trim it down a tiny bit before you stitch it. I probably am not, but you can do that if you want. I'm not going to score mine, I'm just going to fold it. I have a scoreboard, but I rarely use it. Rarely. And then just glue this like that to reinforce it. Use my Fabri-Tac, which is almost empty. Probably hear me shaking it. And the lid is glued on. Okay, so I'm just gonna glue on here. It doesn't have to be like super exact. if you have a brayer, just go ahead and give that a quick roll. Trim down the excess. Okay, so attaching this piece to the outer cover. Obviously you want the direction to be correct. Let me see if I'm in frame here. Okay, you want the direction to be the right orientation. I usually do like a rough gluing, just like add some glue. Oh my gosh. It's like the last quarter of the bottle is a struggle. Oh my goodness. Sorry, you guys. Okay. So just add some glue to the inner part. I'm actually going to lay this on its side so it's easier to get out. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'd hate to have to do this all the way over again because you can't hear. Although I will be making more journals, so that's okay, I guess. Just kind of put it together. Brayer does not really help in this step, unfortunately. Okay. Oh, a note, if you wanted to stitch buttons to your cover, like let's say you decided no flap, before you attach the lining to your journal, obviously you'll want to stitch on your buttons. I am not doing buttons. Okay. Okay, so that's that. You'll want to go in and do another round of stitching around the inside here. Again, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch, somewhere in there. But yeah, that's it, guys. I'm gonna stitch and that'll be it. Alright guys, so that is it for the base cover. Again, I will come back and do a second, like a part 2 for the flap. But yeah, thanks for watching part 1, and I hope this has been helpful.